What's up mga ka-foodtech? Hello and welcome again to another edition of FS 101 lecture series. So just a recap, we've been through a lot of modules already. From module 1, we looked at the state of, we defined food science and technology and looked at the sustainable development goals as well as the state of food and nutrition in the Philippines. We also looked at the history and development of food science and technology, the disciplines that are involved in food science and technology, why we are in the College of Home Economics, as well as the curriculum that you are taking right now. So for today, we want to answer ano nga ba yung role ng food technologist in the society? What are the things that we do and what are the impacts that we could make as a future food scientists and technologists? So most of you were probably not yet born as of 1995. And the IUFOST, or the International Union of Food Scientists and Technologists, met in Budapest, representing over 150,000 food scientists and technologists from around the world, and they made this declaration, which is now known as the Budapest Declaration. Essentially, that's what they plan to do, which is to work for the elimination of hunger and the reduction of all forms of malnutrition throughout the world. Take note that this was way before the Sustainable Development Goals, so they actually already had that goal in mind as to what to do and how more or less to achieve it through the use of food science and technology. Alright, and part of the highlights of the Budapest Declaration is first to ensure the year-round availability of the quantity and variety of safe and wholesome foods. Take note that this even predates the concept of food integrity that we will be discussing later on. But nonetheless, it works around the idea of food security. So that's why it's reflected here that the availability and quantity of food should be year-round. So wala dapat yung mga seasonal na um, kawalan or kakulangan ng pagkain. That's why we have food processing, right? We could make foods that could last for years, or well, if you've watched some YouTube videos, you can see people trying out canned foods that were made in the 1950s or 1960s, and they were still okay because they're hermetically sealed, and they're um, essentially have an infinite lifespan as long as the can is not compromised. All right, so next highlight is to strengthen the food science and technology base to support food and agricultural sectors in order to expand and diversify food supplies. So they do understand that even though their scope as food scientists and technologists is just farm to fork, that they need to work with other professions so that the whole agricultural and food production system would be taken into account. So that would involve even the genetic modification of crops and agricultural professionals' roles in increasing crop yield, among other things. Although, of course, the food scientist's major role to play is to make sure that whatever is produced is not wasted. So we could process and minimize losses along the food supply chain in processing, transport, and even using the allegedly waste products for something else, whether it's a food or non-food use. For example, if you're making potato chips and you're peeling the chips, what do you do with the peels? Can you turn it still into something edible? Or at least not just throw it away for compost and use it for something else? There are a lot of technologies for agricultural waste or production waste. We call this waste valorization, no? Wherein we try to make them into something that is of a higher value other than being thrown into compost. Right. Next is to promote public understanding of issues involving food science and technology to allow beneficial applications of new technology. So up until this time, there are a lot of fear, much in the same way that people fear vaccines and there are anti-vaxxers. There are a lot of people who are, let's say, anti-food processing. They think that eating irradiated food rather would turn them into mutants. Well, that's not really the case. All right, and we need to, as food scientists and technologists, have our personal advocacies to shed light into these issues, the ignorance of the people about what we do and the processes, whether or not they're really harmful, whether in the short term or the long term, right? And that's one of the reasons why, even as a food tech graduate, before I started teaching, I started a blog on food technology in the Philippines, because there's some misconceptions that I'd like to address. And of course, I simply want to make people know more about what is this food science and technology that a lot of people don't know or haven't heard of. Right. Next is a promotion of the safety and quality of all foods. So there are many ways to promote safety and quality, and one of them is through certifications. You actually have a whole subject on quality control in the food industry, where you'll be discussing most of these different certifications. But let's just give you a briefer, no? The BRC, or British Regional Consortium certification, is used for. The British Retail Consortium is a seal used obviously in that part of the world, to assure the safety and quality of small-scale retail products. Of course, we know halal is a certain certification, meaning they're safe to eat for the Islamic population or those with Muslim beliefs. And these have been prepared through whatever halal method is acceptable in a certain country. Kasi actually, worldwide, hindi pare-pareho yung level ng acceptability ng halal for certain countries, no? But generally, these involve things like may ritualistic na parang pinagpe-pray yung food ng isang Islamic religious person, and then there are certain ways as to how you should kill an animal, and then of course what ingredients are supposed to be there, like walang pork, among other things. HACCP, Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. This is a certification you've probably seen if you say look at the back of your Gardenia bread plastic bag. May makikita kayong ganyang logo. So it's a food safety certification, which means na dumaan sa rigorous control checks, and even yung design ng production process ng tinapay is made para tanggalin yung mga hazards that could cause, among other things, foodborne illnesses, no, or other hazards like makakain ka ng stapleware or something. Okay. Hindi ako nagbibiro, no. Kasama talaga yun sa HACCP. And we have the PQA, or the Philippine Quality Award, which is a local award given to companies which meet certain criteria to enhance the quality of their products. So as you know, yung reputasyon ng mga companies, diba? Syempre, malalaman mo yun kung merong mga local companies na alam mong pag binili mo, merong chance na hindi uniform yung quality na product na binibili mo from time to time. Sometimes you'll encounter errors, no? Halimbawa, nandiyan na yung bumili ka ng candy, tapos paghugot mo, balat lang, walang laman sa loob, right? And maybe you've encountered personal horror stories of buying a defective item. I've had a lot of those in my blogs. I've discussed them in detail, including how to get a replacement for them, no, through lodging a customer complaint. So may want to read about them in my personal blog. Wala naman tong grade, no, for enrichment lang.
In some respects,
Okay, another one of the Budapest Declaration's goals is the reduction of pre- and post-harvest losses. So it's been more than 25 years since that declaration, and we know as of now na marami pa rin tayong kailangan gawin towards this end. But just to look at this pictures, no, alam na natin na still a lot of work need to be done, especially in developing countries. Ganyan pa rin yung state ng transport system natin. For example, if you look at this yellow truck, okay, yung parang ginagawang school bus ng iba. Kapag ganyan yung pagkakamada mo sa mga vegetables, and you have a road infrastructure, and even the car suspension is not good, So, pagdating mo talaga sa point of sale mo, sa destination mo, maraming mabubruise na mga ano dyan, from the weight sa pag-alog, pag-shake nung truck up and down, right? And in certain cases, if you invested in a way of transport, even if you could transport less mass per unit volume, kung mas marami ka naman masasalba dun sa food na hindi masisira, mabubruise, or magiging inedible, then that's still a win-win situation, no? Adoption and improvement of traditional foods and processes. So we don't want traditional foods to be left behind in the modernization age, no? Na admittedly, yung ibang traditional foods natin, yung mga native products, those that have been made since, well, maybe even before the Spaniards came or before the American occupation, or 100-year-old na yung heirloom recipe. Definitely, yung iba doon may kailangan kang i-tweak para maging food safe sila, no? Like, for example, I had thesis students documenting ano ba to? Yung indigenous products sa Bicol, no? Or yung ibang mga noodles sa Kabagan, Isabela. Then, nakakatakot kasi yung ibang implements nila parang hindi na hygienic, no? Yung mga wooden implements na feeling mo pinasa pa from one generation to another, but as we know, wood is a porous substance and is therefore susceptible to microbial proliferation. Okay? Or they use products not meant for food contact surfaces as food contact surfaces, like for example yung cooling rack for one of their toasted puto products is yung wire na ang role naman talaga ay para gawing screen sa bintana, no? So anyway, here's one example of an upgraded Pinoy delicacy, no? Yung dinuguan ng Goldilocks. It was thermally treated and hermetically sealed and placed in a pouch which extends its shelf life. Para siyang delata in that sense. Some people even bring this to other countries. Yung mga mag-OFW, babaunin nila yan para makatikim sila ng dinuguan. And then, kakanin. My thesis, both undergraduate and graduate, has been related to kakanin. Nung undergrad ako, yung sapin-sapin, tinry ko siyang ilagay sa pouch, thermally processed. And unfortunately, even though okay naman siya, naluto naman siya and all, I encountered the problem with retrogradation, no? Which means after more than 2 weeks, sobrang tigas na niya, and even if you were to reheat it, hindi na same yung quality niya. Pero that's sapin-sapin that you can take with you and not need refrigeration. Dun sa graduate studies ko naman, I continued the similar thought and tried methods to prolong the texture qualities of heat-treated basic rice cakes na parang suman siya. And actually, I still have some samples now, and there were certain samples na even after a year, malambot pa rin, no? Kapag pinoke mo yung pouch, you can feel your finger sinking doon sa pouch. Parang malambot siya. Alright. But of course, it's not yet commercialized, and haven't actually had the time to work on it again. But nonetheless, it's a proof of concept that our traditional products, for example, usually have a shelf life of 1 day, can be extended so that they can reach the other part of the world safely and be experienced by people from other cultures as well, and say, uy, ito pala yung suman, sapin-sapin, pichi-pichi, kutsinta ng Pilipinas, no? Okay, the IFOS Budapest Declaration also wanted to promote the beneficial application of biotechnology. So, medyo na-demonize itong biotechnology lately, no? Kasi ang alam natin usually mga GMO, are you playing God, gene sequencing, blah blah blah. But did you know that biotechnology saved Hawaii's papaya crops from devastation? So, by developing virus-resistant crops, no? So, there was a time na alam naman natin sa agriculture, pests and diseases could really wipe out certain, let's say, plantations and whatnot. Even in the Philippines, that's a problem with bananas, no? Kapag nagkaroon ng isang disease ang banana sa Pilipinas, could wipe out landfills the size of barangays, or if not bigger, no, or municipalities, di ba? And ganun yung ginawa nila sa papaya noon. So they genetically modified the papaya using biotechnology to give it resistance from that disease which was causing its devastation. So nagkaroon ng virus-resistant na papaya. And of course, I think we can do that with the bananas as well. And there are efforts around the world to address those issues. It's not just about bananas, no? Halos lahat ng crops natin pwede gawin yan. Okay, development and dissemination of improved knowledge of food composition. So as you've seen in recent years, for example, merong mga new knowledge na nagsasurface about nutrition. And with these new developments in nutrition, dapat yung food technologist ay mag-respond din. So, okay, are any of our current products deemed maybe due to new nutritional knowledge deemed obsolete, or should we change these things because they're no longer as nutritious as initially thought? For example, of course, this is also a political issue kasi alam naman natin na yung mga companies na gumagawa ng certain products may vested interest. No? It's generally accepted now, no, that for example, sugar is a more evil food than fat. Kaya nga sumisikat yung keto diet kasi some people are saying hindi naman ikaw sa fat na mamatay or nagkakaroon ng problema sa sugar talaga. But again, it's all still a balance, no? Even if you eat too much fat, we have a cardiologist friend and he'd tell you doing an all-fat diet is still a bad thing. But nonetheless, right now, na-highlight na kung gaano ka delikado yung even small amounts of sugar. I mean, yung akala mo dati na okay lang yung sugar intake mo, pero ngayon pala madami na yon, no? So, that's just an example of improved knowledge on food composition. But among other things, right now, we also have increased knowledge on antioxidants, for example, and what they do. And even right now, kaya di ba minsan yung mga superfoods nakikita mo may mga biglang bagong fads, and that's because there's ongoing research on what foods are good for you and what the effects are. But in general, it's still the best advice is still to eat a diverse amount of foods and limit, of course, yung let's say fats and oils and sugars mo na intake.
Totoo lang, marami pa talaga tayo.
Next is the promotion of domestic and international food trade. So even though we define the home economics as coming from the oikonomos or self-sufficiency, in reality today, there really are benefits to international trade also in the realm of food, no? So, as you can see right now, even for example, kung walang food trade kung walang trade sa global trade sa Pilipinas, baka wala tayong mga cellphones ngayon or very primitive, wala tayong mga kotse or very primitive din, and of course wala rin tayong food. In case you didn't know, marami sa mga processed meat products natin use foreign meat like pork, no? Kasi hindi makasupply yung local ng enough of the same quality ng pork for the volume required by the processors. Or for example, a lot of our rice is actually imported from other countries because we don't even produce enough rice for our own consumption as a country. Right now, even galunggong is imported. Some of our garlic are imported, among other things. No? But of course, dapat yung trade two-way. Tayo din naman, our major agricultural exports are agricultural commodities, bananas, coconut and coconut products, pineapples, and so on. So much so that a lot of the bananas na high grade, yung mga picture perfect, hindi halos nabebenta sa Pilipinas yan, no? And I remember no, nung it was my first time out of the country as a kid, nag-Japan kami, yung saging doon na binebenta per piece in a box with a ribbon. Not kidding, that's a banana for everyday consumption. And guess what? It was made in the Philippines. Walang blemishes at all, perfect yellow, pang movie type na saging and all that, no? So, wow. And at that time, I think it cost 50 pesos for one piece of banana. Okay, so ganon. Nonetheless, yun, very vibrant naman ang trade. And if you even know the reason why the Spaniards conquered was, partly was because of, well, they want to involve themselves in the spice trade. So, the history goes a long way back. Okay, development of food materials with improved functionality. So, what we call functional foods. Maraming nag-advocate nito na imbes na mag-take ka ng medicines or supplements, kumain ka na lang ng mga foods rich in ganito ganyan. And to a certain extent, totoo naman yun. Food was designed so that we can get the nutrients from them. And although essential pa rin naman ng vitamin and mineral supplements, especially if you live in a place where your diet doesn't allow for certain vitamins or minerals to be accessed in the correct amounts, no? Or you simply don't have the money at that time to buy certain nutritious foods. So, as we know, the more nutritious a food is, and it's often more expensive as well. Okay. So there, we try to develop foods with increased functionality. So yun nga, one of my favorites nga is itong milk with oats, kung saan mataas yung kanyang fiber content. Or you can see sometimes na meron mga fortified with vitamin ganito ganyan na foods. And yung mga may claim na sila na, oh, antioxidant, blah blah blah, superfood. Of course, some of them are exaggerated in their claims, but nonetheless, we want to make sure that the food we develop will not just be there to give you calories, give you protein, give you energy, but also make your body better in the long run. Be more efficient and environmentally sustainable food production and processes. So again, take note, this was 1995 when we didn't even have the Sustainable Development Goals. But these food technologists already realized that producing food takes a toll on the environment, and they want to minimize that, let's say, carbon footprint or waste footprint by putting more into recycling, using less energy, using less water and other limited resources in the production of food. Of course, right now, sobrang laking issue niyan. Can you imagine the single-use food packaging that you consume in a week? What if I tell you that some of those packaging materials are not easily recyclable? Okay, yung mga pambalot ng chichirya na parang foil plastic laminates, for example, to be able to recycle them, you first have to remove the layers from each other, separate the foil from the plastic, etc. So, mga ganon, no? And those may require specialized equipment, and sadly, most of them just end up in the landfill. Okay, education in nutrition, food science, and technology at all levels. So, I'll just give you an example. Hanapin nyo na lang ako sa picture na to. This was done, was this 2012 bata? I think so. And in this picture was my boss, which is the first food science and technology graduate of the Philippines, Dr. Sonia Yuson de Leon. So, clue siya yung isa sa pinakamukhang matanda dyan. Okay, what we were doing here. So, I worked for Dr. De Leon, who was also a former faculty of the College of Home Economics. She's the head of the Foundation for the Advancement of Food Science and Technology, and I worked there for a while before teaching. And in this case, we partnered with a school And we held a seminar on integrating food science in the basic elementary and high school curriculum. So we explained to them the basics of what food science was, what it involves, and how we could integrate it so that students will learn about food science as early as grade school or elementary school, no? Kasi sa science and health mo nung meron kang konting nutrition, diba? Go, grow, glow foods, etc. Pero paano naman yung food safety, food processing side? What do the students learn about that? And chances are, if you've reached this level na college na kayo and didn't know a lot about food science and technology when you came in before taking FS 101, then medyo konti lang yung natutunan nyo nung high school or even elementary school about food science and food technology and the topics revolving around it such as food safety, food quality, and food processing. Alright, so well, that's it for this lecture. I hope you did learn a lot, and take note, hindi lang naman yung Budapest Declaration yung basis natin for the role of food scientists and technologists in society. So of course, you could also try to look at more resources if you like, but nonetheless, this gives us the basic idea of our roles and what we plan to achieve based on the curriculum that we've taken. And so for the next few lessons, we'll look at the concept of ethics in food science and as well as the concept of food integrity. Then we'll try to integrate everything we've learned. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. So thank you very much.